Thomas and the Beanstalk. After a busy day on the island of Sodor, Thomas the Tank Engine decided to tell James and Percy his favorite fairy tale, Jack and the Beanstalk. "I like the part about the magic beans," Percy peeped. "I wish a magic beanstalk would grow here on Sodor." The next day, Thomas picked up some sacks of beans from the farm. "Just like in my bedtime story," he chuckled. Suddenly, Diesel 10 appeared around a bend. "Get out of my way!" Diesel 10 roared. Thomas couldn't move fast enough. Diesel 10 bashed into him and raced off. Thomas crashed into a side rail and tipped over. Some of the cargo spilled out of his trucks. Thomas awoke and noticed some beans scattered in the grass next to the tracks. One grew into a towering beanstalk. "Those must have been magic beans," Thomas exclaimed. The giant beanstalk had a railway track circling all the way to the top. Curious, Thomas decided to ride up the track. He's very brave, isn't he, Alex?
Yes.
Around and around Thomas climbed. It seemed like the beanstalk went on forever. Finally, Thomas reached the top. He saw an amazing sight. There, up above the clouds, Thomas discovered a giant magical world. "Bust my buffers," he gasped. "Everything is so big." Thomas followed the track into a castle courtyard. There, he realized he was traveling on a Sodor-sized railway. All the buildings, trees, and railroad signs were just the right size for Thomas. It was a toy train set. "Why is everything else so big?" Thomas wondered aloud. Then Thomas heard the sound of a steam whistle. Thomas looked around, but he couldn't tell where the sound came from. At that moment, the ground beneath him began to shake. Suddenly, a gigantic foot landed in front of him. That must be what it's like for Thomas when we have him on his rails here in our house. I think that's about how tall we are compared to him. Thomas looked up and saw a man towering over the entire courtyard. He was a giant, just like the giant from Thomas's bedtime story. Thomas saw a gleaming gold steam engine on the track ahead of him. But the giant reached down with his enormous hand, picked her up, and put her down on another track. The giant played with the gold engine as if she were a toy. Suddenly Diesel 10 steamed by. He was big enough for the giant himself to ride in. The giant put down the gold engine and stomped over to the huge Diesel. The gold engine told Thomas that she had been taken from her home. "I run on golden coal," she said. "I wish I could go home." Thomas didn't know how to get her home, but he promised to take her to the island of Sodor, where everything was the right size for them. "Sodor sounds wonderful," the gold engine said. Thomas told her they could escape down the giant beanstalk. They headed toward the courtyard gate, but Thomas was out of coal. The gold engine gave Thomas some golden coal. Thomas felt magical. They quickly raced toward the gate. Suddenly, the giant cried, "Fee, fi, fo, fum. I see two engines on the run. If they're toys or if they're real, I'll now have two engines to steal." That's kind of scary. The giant and Diesel 10 chased after Thomas and the gold engine. "Get back here, little toy tank engine!" Diesel 10's booming voice rang out. Thomas sped up, heading toward the Beanstalk. If they could just get back to Sodor, he knew everything would be all right. Thomas and the gold engine sped down the track toward Sodor, but the giant was coming down the Beanstalk after them. "Oh no!" Thomas exclaimed. When he made it to the bottom, Thomas thought quickly. He backed up and bashed into the Beanstalk with all his might. He saw his friends James and Percy in the distance and called to them for help. All four engines slammed into the Beanstalk. The Beanstalk and the giant were about to fall. Thomas closed his eyes, bracing for the crash. Thud! Thomas opened his eyes. Percy and James were there, but the little gold engine was gone. "It must have been a dream," Thomas said to his friends. Suddenly, Thomas's driver held up a piece of golden coal he had found in Thomas's hopper. Thomas gasped. It had all been a dream, hadn't it?